So as I said before, my name is Stephanie Krishnan. I am an Associate Vice President with IDC Insights. My role is to look at the role of technology on industry. At IDC, we bring data to industry to help with things like systems decision making, help to advisors strategies on how technology should go forward for companies like yourselves. Today we're here to talk about how unified data transforms health and life sciences, looking at this from a data perspective, and thinking about how the potential for AI to power decision making. We're also going to look at some of the hurdles around that, and there obviously are some, and we want to explore that more with a conversation with you. I thought I would just start with a quote. I'm a Deming fan. I mean, my early background, I think everybody who went to university or has done some sort of education has run up against Deming, and I'm sure you will come across it in your daily work. But without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And I think that's pretty foundational to what we do in logistics, what we do in manufacturing, what we do in a lot of our operations. Flying by the seat of our pants is not a way to run a business. However, we're getting to the point where it's without data, you're just another AI with an opinion, all right? We are seeing that organizations that are relying on or not integrating or joining together their systems and bringing data into their conversations with AI or into their AI capabilities are risking having garbage in, garbage out, but probably at a rate faster than we've ever seen before, right? We're actually at a point where there are opportunities to poison AI, where there are opportunities to, you don't even have to be as aggressive with that. You can just not feed it data and you can have AI model drift and then have bad decisions as a result. So this is something that is a key risk, and I think it's top of mind for a lot of organisations. As we go, we are seeing that there are other challenges that organisations are facing, right? They're thinking about how they're building their systems, and in a lot of cases, whether you're on the transportation side or whether you're on the life sciences side, we're seeing that organisations have focused on cost efficiency, right, at the expense of agility. Now, as AI is enabling not just the operation side of our business, but also the exploration, the opportunities to personalise medicine, we're actually seeing we're going into an era where agility is going to be more important than ever before, right? And being able to adjust our systems and adjust our operations in order to address what's needed by not just our customers but by the patients is going to become critical. And so organisations that have focused on cost efficiency might find that they're actually a step behind their competitors compared to some of the others that are looking at agility as a solution for the market. Now, obviously we don't do things in isolation. Supply chains are about joining together multiple companies in order to deliver things. And so we have to bring our partners with us. And sometimes when we put in some of these solutions, having supply chain partner constraints can also be a big consideration. And as logistics providers, a lot of us are dealing with that. We're offering capabilities or talking about capabilities with our partners, but they're not necessarily coming along on that journey with us. And then, of course, we have issues we've either invested in disparate processes, we have shadow IT, we have different systems, or we have legacy systems, and we're dealing with, the inability to integrate all that information together. So these are some real challenges that organisations are having in the supply chain, and what's happening, the consequence of this, is that they end up flying a little blind, right? We have the visibility and the agility gap, and IDC has actually done a number of surveys, and this has popped up for the last few years, but this is the survey result from this year, where it says 57% of Asia-Pacific life science organisations cite lack of visibility and agility as the number one gap in their supply chain that will be an issue if not addressed, not just ever, within the next 12 months. Yeah? And this is actually the top response. So when we look at this, it's happening because of things like lack of data analytics and lack of ability to join systems together, join the information together and come up with real insights about what's happening in our processes, within our operations, and being able to react to it in a timely manner. One of the things we talk about is we have access to data, and sometimes we give our models access to data, but data has an expiry date, as you all know, right? Yesterday's data sometimes doesn't cut it. You need to make sure that you're bringing this in and being able to have that analytics in real time to make decisions that are going to have a positive impact on your organisation. And then again, bringing the partners into that journey, and how we're going to be able to not just integrate with them or have interoperability with their systems, but be able to collect data from them if they don't have that much sophistication. And we're actually now at a point where we have a technology that allows us to address that. We're seeing some really clever stuff where we're using things like scanning of handwritten chits to emailing documents to email addresses and having them ingested and put into systems, right? We're at a point where we can actually bring along partners at different levels of sophistication. We need to start stepping up for this, because this is actually what is causing some of the lack of agility and visibility. All right. Now I'm just going to do a quick short poll with you guys. All right. Now it's not a raise your hand poll. It's a how are you doing poll. All right. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is I'm going to ask you to put your hands like this. All right. And I want to get a sense of where visibility is in your supply chains. Now, if you think your visibility is the best, we're all over it, I want you to do this, right? You're up the top, right? But it's like a gauge, right? If your visibility is terrible, you've got no visibility here. And if you're somewhere in between, show me where you are. 1, 2, 3, go. All right, look around the room. See different responses. Yeah, some are like this, some are higher, all right? So it gives you just to think where you are on this particular gauge and where you're going for a journey. And this visibility, if you are up here, think about the systems that you have in place to address that, right? Do you have the ability to see inventory posture in your organisation? Do you have the ability to look at critical conditions like temperature and humidity and see where that's at, right? These are all the things that are going to contribute to that visibility and agility. Okay. So we've talked about the challenge, we've talked about the consequences of that. Let's look at the ambition, right? And the industry is betting on data and AI. In a lot of instances when we asked how important will the following technologies be to your supply chain in the next 3 years? Okay, now you can see here on the life sciences side, they're going heavy on artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, right? This is a heavy investment area for them. And it's being done from a number of different positions. One is obviously the discovery side, but also when you invest in a technology, you want to scale the technology. So they're trying to look at multiple use cases, and invariably this is turning to the operations side as well. On the transport and logistics side, there is a strong interest in AI and machine learning. However, there is also a lot of emphasis, and you can see, in getting the supply chain SaaS cloud applications and the B2B collaborative networks. And this is speaking directly to having the data foundation being put in place and also being able to integrate our partners, right? And so this is showing that this is a priority for organisations in our industry, in the logistics and supply chain side of things, in order to be able to meet the requirements of our customers. And in some cases we have been relying on slower systems or on less sophisticated systems, but the call is starting to come, especially with the technology that we have in place now, that we upgrade this. And we are seeing organisations prioritise this as a result. Now, obviously, there are going to be a number of barriers around this. High implementation costs and uncertain ROI always comes out as number one. But a lot of that has to do with the rest. Right? When we look at complexity and integrating AI with existing operational systems, this is one of the things that's actually contributing to concerns about ROI, right? And concerns about costs, because there is that complexity in bringing multiple types of data together in order to facilitate real-time decision making. Then we have the talent to build it, right? Where do we get that from? And that's something that I'll be talking to you about later in the discussion. Also looking about lack of trust in AI-generated decisions. Right? And a lot of times this is the case because we haven't built that data fabric across the organisation. Now, when I talk about a data fabric, I'm talking about joining together all that data. And normally we talk about it like a digital thread, right? Going through, like from following an order through a supply chain. But when we're looking at a fabric, you're thinking about multiple threads coming together and being able to use the multiple pieces of information to make complex decisions, right? Now, I'm explaining this in very simple terms. Obviously, there are a lot of technical aspects around that. But just to give us an idea, because I think data fabric is going to be key to Mark's presentation later, as well as some of our discussion. And of course, if you add all this up, complexity of integration, looking at talent, having issues with trust with regards to decisions because we don't have that information in place, then you are going to result in high implementation costs and uncertain ROI, because you're looking at employing people, you're looking at getting the systems in place that you maybe didn't have, right? And these are all valid concerns, right? But the journey that happens doesn't necessarily have to be one that stops because you don't have that, right? And that's something that we can address later. So in terms of a first step, how do we bring all this together? All right. What we're trying to do is think about how can we bring the systems together to achieve that unified picture. And the first is to try and think about how do we actually architect end-to-end visibility. That's what that E to E means, right? Thinking about how do we bring in TMS data, WMS data, our order management system. Looking at how does that actually work with even development systems of our customers to identify when new drugs are coming out, and how do I ensure that they get time to market? How do I integrate with hospitals, right, to make sure that I have all the things ready for a surgery so that equipment isn't missing, right? All of this is looking at how do we bring all of that information together. Thinking about predictive AI, right? Usually companies work on, let's look at things historically, right? We have a lot of historical data in our WMS and TMS, and we compile them into monthly reports, and we go, yay, we did well last month, right? Woohoo. Then we get to a point where we start to look at what's happening now, right? And saying, being able to flag, oh, this is going to be late, maybe we need to do something about it. But then getting to a point where we can predict it, all right? Or this particular route where things have been shipped has historically been late. Let's look at how we can actually, put predictions around it and start to then put decisions around that are going to enable us to come out in front. Looking at cost savings and opportunities. Now, often this is put up first, but actually what we're actually seeing organisations from an AI perspective come to the table with is actually more capability rather than cost savings. All right, the cost savings do come and the efficiencies are being found, but a lot of this is looking at how can we actually increase our capability to the customer. Am I able to provide them a system because I'm able to, a service where I'm able to predict, hey, this will be an issue, you need to look at alternate suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. And then balancing efficiency and that resilience. All right, remember the first slide that I showed you where we're investing in cost efficiency compared to agility? Right? We need to balance that, because in the way that we're looking with product development, be it life sciences or any other industry, that's going to be accelerating. And we need to think about how we're going to bring that to market faster for our clients, our customers, and how we're going to be able to be more adaptable in the way that personalised things are delivered through supply chains. So I'll end my part. Like I said, I'm trying not to make it too long, but I'll end my part with a path forward. All right. Obviously, prioritising the data layer is important. Now, there are opportunities to get AI to help you with that, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to think about how do you look at all your data sources in the end-to-end supply chain and bring that together into a way that's going to be decision supporting, right? You're going to need to think about mandating ecosystem integration. Now, how you bring customers into your systems and how you bring data into your systems does not necessarily mean, okay, you need to connect with me, all right? We're at a point where we actually have multiple ways of connecting and looking at how you can actually work with, different levels of sophistication in your customers, or even different commercial realities with your customers as to how much you are able to successfully charge them, because it's going to come to a point where what is the cost of them not integrating versus having that information available, right? And this is going to be particularly relevant when we look at the varied landscape that we have in Asia-Pac. Having the difference between the sophistication of somebody in Singapore and Thailand versus somebody who might be in Indonesia is obviously going to be, potentially quite different. Think about decision intelligence and what is actually helping you make decisions, right? Otherwise, are you just offering an opinion, right? We obviously, as humans, have huge supercomputers in our brain that are able to help ingest a lot of data, but the reality is that we are getting to a point where we have so much data that we can't really ingest it as much as we used to be able to. It was a lot simpler. and having decision support is going to be very necessary. And then think about how are you going to drive this to help you to orchestrate multiple parties in your supply chain, whether it be multiple warehouses, multiple facilities, multiple partners. Are you going to help them make decisions about country of origin, for example, so that they can then have access to different markets? How are you going to actually think about orchestrating the supply chain and helping your partners deal with the new complexity and deal with it at a level of sophistication that's going to give them a competitive advantage? All right, my name is Stephanie Krishnan. I'm just going to pause there and let Mark come over and talk about the intersystem side of things, and then we'll come back for a discussion. Thank you very much.